Hey, just a quick note to let you know that this video is a pre-recorded live event. If you'd like to join our upcoming events, such as demos and office hours, you can check out our schedule on our support page. Hope you find this video helpful and look forward to seeing you in our next event. Well, thanks everyone for that can join this live tutorial, this live demo here. And of course, welcome to any of those that are watching this video later. Today, what I'm going to be going through is a demo of Microsoft's Power BI software and how you can use that with ZooMonitor. And so my goal today is really to just introduce Microsoft Power BI. This is a tool that I've been using since 2015 at Lincoln Park Zoo. It's in a very rough sketch. It's basically a tool to visualize data and can help you visualize a lot of data. And so that was certainly helpful for me. In our video today, in this recording, I'm not going to certainly have time to go through all of the nuance that is Power BI. And really my hope is just kind of give a broad overview of the software and kind of share one of my reports that I have at Lincoln Park Zoo. Okay, so my hope is that this is the first of multiple videos I do on Power BI. It's certainly something that it's a piece of software that I found a ton of value in and I certainly love. I'd say for me, in terms of software loves, which of course I have because I'm a dork like that, I would put it kind of right up there with ZooMonitor, which is maybe heresy for the product manager of ZooMonitor to say, but that's how much I love Power BI. So I'm hoping that there's going to be some more content in the future that I can share with this. But until then, I did want to point out a few more resources that are available or coming soon. So recently, I just had a manuscript published in the journal Animals that I can share with everyone here. So this is a manuscript that basically touches on the role of business intelligence tools with behavior monitoring software and how those can really integrate together. And that's obviously what I'm going to be talking about today with ZooMonitor and Power BI. And so this manuscript here goes into a lot more detail and also gives some background here on Power BI and talks a little bit about some different pieces there. One of the things I'm super excited about this manuscript is that it forced me to make some more resources for our lovely community out there. And so as part of this manuscript, I put together some template files that are available as supplementary materials here. And you can also see them in our resource library on our support page. And so those are Power BI template files that you can download and you can use with your ZooMonitor exports to sort of help you accelerate kind of using Power BI there. And then the last thing I wanted to mention too, last resource there, is if you're watching this video before August, the end of August 2022, I'm also hosting a behavior data analysis workshop at the AZA annual meeting. And so that will be Sunday, August 28th from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. And so if you are attending the AZA annual conference, you can register for that. It's a $75 additional fee on top of the registration. And it's that 4-hour workshop there. But during that workshop, I'm really hoping to carve out a lot of time there to kind of go into Power BI a little bit more detailed there. Okay, so with all of that, I should probably talk a little bit about what Power BI is here before I go a little bit further there. So it is, like I said, it's a piece of software by Microsoft to help visualize data. The name Power BI, so the BI there stands for business intelligence. What that refers to is basically kind of a suite of software and processes that basically help make sense of data, I think is a very broad way to think about it, but basically use data to guide decisions. And that's really the goal of what business intelligence is to get to that decision making, to support that decision making process. And so you could probably see how that would be very helpful for us in sort of more behavior roles in zoos and aquariums. And the power side of Power BI refers to a suite of tools that were originally available in Excel for a long time. So that was the Power Query, Power View, and Power Pivot tools that were available in Microsoft Excel. And some of those are still available in Microsoft Excel today. And those tools basically got pulled out into the standalone program, which is now Microsoft Power BI, back in 2015. And so basically this evolved out of tools from Excel, has its own standalone piece of software now. Power BI comes in three flavors. So there is the desktop application, which is what I'm going to be showing today and which what I'll be using. That's basically a software that you would download onto your computer, and you would use that to author any reports, create any of those reports that you want to do. Those reports can then be shared to the Power BI service, which is another version of Power BI there. And so the service is basically sort of the web version of Power BI. You can also create reports there as well. I find it certainly a little bit more useful to use the desktop application. It's a little bit more tailored to creating reports there than the web version, but you can certainly do that in the web version as well. And the web version is really a little bit more focused on sharing reports and sharing dashboards with other users at your organization. And so that's kind of really what happens in the Power BI service. And then the third flavor of Power BI is the mobile apps. And so there are apps available for iOS and Android. And so you can have any of your reports that you've created, you can have those viewing on your phone there too. And I should also mention that the desktop application that I'm going to be showing today, that those template files I mentioned earlier, you can certainly use those with that desktop application. That desktop application is free to download. The service, you do need a pro plan to share with other users. And so you can publish your Power BI report to the web, but if you wanted to share that with other users, that's where you would need, and they would need, a Microsoft a pro license. ZooMonitor has pro plans, so cross my wires there a little bit. But you would need a pro license to do that, and those are actually pretty affordable. You can certainly check online to see how much those are, but you would need that for all of the people that you're sharing with there. One of the things that certainly I have been super excited about with Power BI is that, and like a lot of software nowadays, it is sort of constantly evolving, right? So there are new features that get released every month, and so it's really exciting to be able to kind of track that progress. There might be something that you want available that's not available now, but maybe in the future. And so it's really exciting to sort of see that evolution and to see some of those new things that are highly requested come available. And so that's certainly something to keep in mind too, that this is not it's never kind of an end product that you're looking at. It's always kind of growing and evolving with new stuff there. And I think the last thing I wanted to point out here too is just it is a very user-friendly piece of software. It's certainly going to be intimidating probably as any new piece of software probably would be. There are two, not one, but two languages in Power BI, as if one wasn't enough. There is the DAX language, which you can use to create some metrics, and you can use to do some stuff in Power BI. And then you can also, in Power Query is built off of a separate language called the M coding language. And so there's DAX and M are both in Power BI. I'm not going to be going through a lot of detail with DAX and M today. And the reason for that is because most of what you do in Power BI, you can certainly do with a lot of point and click interfaces there. So it's certainly not a piece of software that you're going to need to learn coding languages to be sufficient. That's certainly not the case there. So it's pretty user-friendly for new users there. So with all of that, I guess I will pull over and start sharing my report. Okay, there we go. So this is one of my reports at Lincoln Park Zoo. This is for our African lions. Our lions are one of about, I think we have about 30, currently around 35 species that we have ongoing behavior monitoring for. And so we have a team of amazing volunteers at Lincoln Park Zoo that record our behavior data using the ZooMonitor app. And then I take that data and basically visualize that here with Power BI. And so you can see one of these reports here. You can see this report, the start date here says 2021. This was a new project that we started with the opening of our new habitat, our Pepper Family Wildlife Center habitat for our lions. We have actually been monitoring lions before that in our previous habitat since I think back to 2014 or 2015. So we had a number of data that actually led to the construction of our lion habitat that we were able to use. And then that's this data set here is basically data from our new habitat. So just to take a quick step of what you're looking at, just step back here of what you're looking at. This is one page essentially in this report. And so in Power BI lingo, there are reports and dashboards, right? And so a lot of times you would think the dashboard is the thing that has multiple visuals on it. Yes, that's true. However, in Power BI, it can be a little confusing because the term they use for dashboards is basically a canvas, if you will, that is available in the service, so up in the web, where you can pin visuals from reports. So if I wanted to pin any visuals from this report, I could pin it to that canvas, and that canvas is called a dashboard in Microsoft Power BI lingo. This would be called a report. I would say informally, we would probably call this a report full of dashboards in here. But that term dashboard is something that's more specific in Power BI, just so everyone's familiar with that. And so this page of the report here, you can see I basically have a number of different squares here. And so what I did is basically set these up as bookmarks for other pages here. So this is kind of an interactive report. Like I said, I started using Power BI back in 2015. I can certainly confess that my first reports looked nothing like this. They were much, much more basic. This is obviously years and years of me layering and evolving my reports a little bit more. And certainly your reports can look completely different for your needs there. But basically each of these is essentially a bookmark that goes to another page in the report. So you can see the different pages here. And so I was going to tick through basically a few pages here to kind of show the report, and then I was going to show you a little bit of behind the scenes here with Power BI. So I clicked the tab down there, which you can also click the tabs down here, or I could have clicked the amazing tile that I made to do that. And so let's see here. This page here is for our observers, looking at basically our number of sessions. So let me pull it back a little bit in time here. I am going to jump back a little bit further. This one visual down here for the last 7 days doesn't seem like it wants to show me the last 7 days. Okay, we will soldier on. All right, so this report is basically looking at the number of observations that we have in for our Lion project from our volunteers. And so we have a couple different groups here. So our volunteers are our main group that does a lot of the observations. We also have for this project our keepers, our animal care team at the zoo. Helps a ton with observations for this group here. And so we have observations from our animal care team here as well as our volunteers. And then, of course, we have our animal welfare science program team, which includes myself and a few other people at the zoo. And so we record data, and this is basically kind of a high-level project management view of the data here. So this isn't any sort of behavior information. This is showing us more how many observers do we have, how many days have we observed, how many observations are we getting per day, and so forth. And so you can see the number of sessions per month, the number of sessions per hour, and then this visual down here, which isn't, of course, wanting to work for me right now, is the number of visuals or number of sessions per day over the last 7 days here. And so this is just kind of a high-level overview of project management. I also have pages in here showing the ethogram. So for any of our managers that have this report shared with them, if they want to see any of the behaviors and how we define the behaviors, they can certainly look at the ethogram built into the Power BI report here. And then I also have this page here, which is kind of a summary of behavior. So this is behavior here. This isn't the number of sessions. And this is kind of looking at a very high level picture of the behavior. So looking at, in terms of percent of time, what are the top 5 behaviors during this date range? And of course, I should have mentioned up here, I have filters up here that you can see. And so you can filter by animal, of course, date, quarter of year, behavior category, behavior, so forth. And then I have an activity budget in here. And then I also visualize the percent of time by month and by hour over here. And you could certainly create different visuals if you want these to be column charts. You could certainly do that. A lot of flexibility there. And then one more report that I will jump into here as well and show is our behavior details report. So if we wanted to look at right now, it's filtered for locomotion. And so in this report, that previous one is showing all behaviors in the project that we recorded. This one, I have it filtered for a specific behavior here, locomotion. And so this is showing how that varies over time, looking at it by per week. You can see basically for our different lions where it occurs in the habitat, and then by month and by hour here. So there's different ways that to look at the data and sort of get this high level overview of it there. And that's really what these dashboards are intended for, is that kind of more exploratory data analysis process there. Everything we're looking at here in Power BI, so I'll jump back to maybe the behavior summary page here, is you're seeing right now the report view. So there's a few other views that I wanted to point out here. You can also look at the data view here. And so this will show you basically the data table for any of the things over here. And these things are called queries. So I'll be getting into that in a second here. So each of these is a different query in this project. And so if I click a different one, let's say behavior percent data, you'll see that table of data here. And so this is basically the table of data that you're seeing in here. And then the last one I wanted to point out, and this is certainly an important one for people that are more, that have a background in Excel. This is certainly not a piece that you would have in Excel natively and how most people would be using it. You can through Power Query and such, but if you weren't modeling your data, you would, of course, in Excel, just have your spreadsheet with all of your data in a single sheet. And it doesn't really have any relationships to any other sheets, right? It's standalone. However, in Power BI, the way this works is you're working off a relational table database. And so you're not working off just one table of data. You can be working off many tables of data, and then they can relate to each other in different ways, typically one-to-one type relationships or one-to-many type relationships there. And so just a quick example of that here, let's say like our raw data here. This is basically what I pull in straight from the ZooMonitor export. And so this is from our Excel file coming straight in here with the raw data. This obviously has a relationship to our session details. And so this is a query I created that basically takes our exported data and makes it one row per session. And the reason for that, and that's a really useful tool to do when you're modeling your data, is you want a key for your data, right? Right now in our raw data, there's lots of rows per session. So everything you record in ZooMonitor gets a separate row. So if you're recording interval data, you record 10 intervals, you'll have 10 rows there for that session. And so if you want to do a relationship between that table and another table, you've now got 10 rows of data saying, what the temperature was on that session. You don't really need that. You really just want, for any of your session questions or your date or your time, you really just want one row for that session. And that's what the session details here is. So basically this one here, and I can show you what that looks like here. If I can find it over here. Certainly if you're familiar with the ZooMonitor export, you'll recognize a lot of these columns. And one of the things you'll notice here is the session ID. There's only one per row here. And so basically collapsing down and taking only the unique, one unique row per report there, or per session, apologies. And so you can see all the data here. And also what you're seeing here too is I cut out all of the behavior data because this isn't obviously to visualize that. This is really to show, to use as a key. So any of the session questions, stuff like that. For this project, let me scroll over. Like we have crowd size that we record, we have weather, we have temperature. So those are our 3 session questions. And you can see I have some other calculated columns that I threw in here as well to make it even more fun. So it's very easy to do some of those things. And I will show you how to do that next. So this is basically, visualizing the data in Power BI here. However, when you bring the data into Power BI and you're transforming and cleaning it, you're not doing that here necessarily. You're doing that through Power Query, which in Power BI is under this transform data area. So if you click transform data, you can see up here at the top, it says Power Query Editor, which is basically that same tool I mentioned that's still in Excel that you can do in Excel as well. So if you're familiar with that in Excel, this will certainly look familiar. And if you get familiar with it here, you've just learned also a new tool to make you even better at Excel. So double win. And so you can see over here, these are all the queries. So I have a bunch of queries basically for this report. And then inside each query, you can see here are a number of data steps. And so that's kind of the relationship here, is that you have a query, which basically is your list of steps to analyze the data. And all of these steps here is where you're bringing in your data, of course, as a source step at the start there. And then you're doing a lot of transformations, So for this one, for instance, I removed some columns. I merged some queries here. I expanded some columns. I added new columns. I inserted some of these built-in date time variables like the month name, day name. Super easy to do that. You can just click a column up here, and then you can go to add column, and you can see that automatically it lets you, you want to add the start of the month, or how many days are in the month, or the name of the month. All of these things automatically, you can just add that column by just point and click interface, not having to do any coding here. So super useful tools to work with your data there. And so in this add column, you can certainly see a lot of other really cool stuff. So you can add conditional columns. That can be really helpful. For instance, if you have a session question like temperature, you might want to bin those temperature ranges, maybe 10 degree Fahrenheit ranges, something like that. You can easily do that here. You could go to, one of your values here. Let's see if I have a temperature in here. I might not. I might have pulled it out, or it might be there and I just have too many columns. Let me go to the session details here and I can pull that up just to give a quick example of what that would look like. So question weather, crowd size. I know you're here. Here you are. So question temperature. You can click this, you can click conditional column here. And you get this pop up here, which basically, gives you all of the if, then in a point and click interface. So if you've created some conditional logic formulas in Excel with if thens, this is obviously a lot easier, a lot more user friendly here, because it's all working through this point and click interface here. So you could say, if question temperature is less than 50, you can call it something like under 50, for instance, like that. And then you can add an additional clause there saying something like if temperature is greater than, 50, or probably if we want to make sure that this is working correctly, you would say something like if it's less than 60, you could say something like 50 to 60, something like that. So really useful to create these, kind of complex if then, and then you have down here as an else. So if you do want for some error checking, let's say somebody might have recorded a temperature of, 500 degrees, something like that. It's not quite that hot out. You could put something down here, which I usually do, something like 999, which is just like a simple code that I know if I see that, that means there was probably an error in the data entry there, and I can go back and catch that there. So really easy to do some of that here through this point and click interface. And you also saw when I showed that that raw data there too, there was some things like merging and appending. So you can pivot, you can pivot any column. So certainly I do that for my percent data. I'll just give a quick overview here of this one and how the steps that I do here. So I bring in my data from raw data. I do some filtering. I remove some columns. So at this point, when I remove columns, it's basically down to just the behavior data that I want. And the really nice thing too that you're seeing here is that when you have all of these steps in each query, if something breaks in your query, it makes it super easy to kind of go back and see where it broke, what it looked like on the previous step, right? So it's not like, if you're familiar with like coding languages, it's not like you have, a really long formula that you're trying to debug or code like that. It's all showing up right here. It's taking a little bit to load. It's not very happy with me right now. But basically each of these steps would show you the table of data there as it goes through. And so in this one here, you can see I also group rows, I pivot the data. And so essentially the way I calculate the percent data here is I bring it down to a column that has all the behavior variables. So for me, a lot of our projects, that's interval channel 1 value, I think it would be called. And so I take that, I duplicate it, so I have 2 copies of that same column next to each other, and then I pivot it, and I use one of those columns to pivot to put on the column headers, and then the other column I use to actually populate the fields inside. And so I have it aggregate how many times that behavior occurred. And so I pivot it out, and now I have 1 column per behavior, and each row is basically, each cell under that is showing you how many times that behavior occurred for a session. And then I unpivot it because to do a lot of the visualizations, you don't want your data in that wide format that I just described where you have your data pivoted out. You want it in a long format. So you want all of your behavior names in a column. You want all of your behavior percents in another column. And so I pivoted it out, pivot it, and then unpivot it back. And then it's back into a long format right there. So super easy to do that. And you can see those steps down here. Obviously don't have time to kind of go into more detail about that here and show every step. If you are familiar with R or Python and want to get fancy, you can also run some of those scripts here as well. So if you are doing some R analysis right now for your behavior data, you can actually give that a try and import some of that R script right here to do any of those visuals, pull from those visualization libraries and stuff like that. So certainly a lot of potential there. And so once you basically do all of your data shaping and stuff in here, that's where you'll go to this close and apply step here. And so when you do that, that is basically taking all the changes you just made. Probably are going to see a pop-up show up here that it's going to run. My computer is definitely running a little slower today. And so when you do the close and apply, it would be basically taking all the steps that you just did, and it would be putting that in here as well. And so that's kind of where all these queries started from, was from that Power Query step there. All of the stuff I showed you in Power Query, so I mentioned that language M earlier. If you do want to get in and take it a little bit further and learn some of the language behind Power Query, that would be that M language I mentioned. And so you can do that and write some basic formulas there as well in Power Query. And the language that's behind what we're seeing right here that you would be using is the DAX language. So those are the 2 languages. That Power Query for the cleaning and transforming your data is the M language. But more likely than not, you can just get by with, just using the point and click interface you just saw me use. And then if you want to do any sort of DAX formulas, you can do that in here. So I can just expand down here and show this query here. And you'll see a few extra columns here with this little calculator. And so what this is showing is actually a calculated measure. So you can do this new measure, a new column, and that's what that is showing there. And so if I click one of these here, you can get an example of what that looks like here. So I have a behavior average, which is averaging, the behavior percent data, and behavior percent data is the query name. And then this is the column it's averaging here is behavior percent. Super basic formula right here, but this language here that you're seeing is the DAX language. And so to create any of these formulas here after you've transformed your data, that would be DAX. I think to finish off, I just wanted to show, just put together a quick visual, and just so you can kind of see that, since I'm just realizing that I haven't actually talked at all about the visuals here for our data visualization tool. So Power BI comes with a lot of built-in visuals. So you can see all of those here, and you can see additional third-party visuals that I have added down here. And so built-in visuals, you can see there's quite a number. You have your basic stack bar chart, column chart. I'm not going to go through each of these. But you have your clustered, stacked, you have your area, you have your line, you have your combos, you have your pie charts, donuts, so forth. One of the ones, if you're obviously coming from Excel, that you probably wouldn't be as familiar with there would be to add cards. So you can add cards here to visualize like a single piece of information. So let me go ahead and we can do that. So I don't know what this number would be referring to, but if you have a specific number you want to visualize, you can throw that out in a card there. And you can also do multi-row cards here too if you wanted to view that by, let's say, focal name, something like that. Let me drop it there. So I dropped it above, and you can see for our lions, Cleo, Hasira, Jabari, Pili Pili, unknown lion, which was Pili Pili before he became Pili Pili, and Zari, you can see what that number would look like there. And right now it's giving the same number, and that's basically how it's averaging the data here. So for you, you would probably be using something different. Let me drag down behavior percent here. Let me put it under, so you can, obviously the order of these matter and how they're going to show up over here. And so you can have all of those showing up down here. And you can see there are different numbers. You would want to filter for a single behavior, something like that. And so it would show up what that behavior percent would be for each individual here. And right now it's not summarizing the data at all, but if you click this little drop down here, you can see all the different ways you can summarize your data built in there. So you don't need to go into DAX and create that behavior averages there. You can just go to average right here, and you can average the data. And you see when I did that behavior average, we've got back to what it was before with the DAX formula of showing that 3.8 there, which is pretty meaningless in this example. But if you were filtering for a specific behavior, this would show you that behavior for each individual there. And so maybe if I want to just try to do that on the fly and see how that goes, we can add a slicer here. So this is, let me undo that. Let me add a slicer over here. So a slicer is another one that you can actually add slicers in Excel, but that might not be something you're familiar with. And obviously for a dashboard type layout like this, it's pretty important. So if we wanted to add a slicer for the behavior here, you could do that. And so now you can see all of our different behaviors here. And so let's say we wanted to look at locomotion, you click locomotion, and it's now going to filter that. And so that's really the beauty of this, is these dashboards are completely interactive visuals that you're creating here. You click one column in one of your visuals, it's going to filter all the other visuals on that page there. And you can change that behavior if you didn't want it to do that, but that's what it would do by default there. See if I can grab this. There we go. I can pull that over, and you can show this in different ways. Like obviously that's taking up a lot of space right there. So you can also just change that to a drop down. And now you're seeing basically what I have up here. These are slicers, and that's the drop down right there. And so let me just pull this over here, and I'll just do that. And so what I was also going to show is just pulling over like a clustered column chart and just showing like a quick activity budget here. So same idea, I have this behavior percent that I already calculated out. I can add that to the y-axis here. I would want on the x-axis our behaviors. So let me make this a little bit bigger. Right now, it looks like it doesn't make any sense. And that is because right now it's giving me a count by default. So if I just change that to an average, now we're going to get what our activity budget looks like. And it's sorting it right now, not by the behavior name, but by how much the value is. So of course, sitting lying is being shown first, not visible second. They are lions, and as many of you should know, they spend a lot of time inactive. And certainly we see that, of course, with our data here. And then you can, of course, also, if you want to take your focal name, you can add that to a legend there. You can also do, if you're familiar with like using R and doing like trellis type plots, you can do that actually pretty easily now in Power BI. So you can drag down to small multiples, and you can see basically broken out by individual the activity budget for each animal. And so this is basically each showing you how easy it is to just with drag and drop interface kind of create those visuals. You can then customize the appearance and do some formatting there. So that's what you'll see over here is different ways you can format the visual here. And then you can even do some basic kind of analytics here as well to it. So you can add like an average line, for instance, if you want to add a line to your scatter plot, something like that, you can easily do that in here as well. And error bars, which I'll touch on in a second here. But basically, that's a really quick, rough overview of what a report looks like. Of course, your reports can look completely different, for what you would be using there. Okay. So that was, a very quick overview of the Power BI report. I did want to end with highlighting some things that can be challenging in Power BI. So it's certainly not all roses. It's mostly roses, but it's not all roses. A few things, certainly if you're new to database structures and modeling, that's going to be obviously a hurdle. If you're coming from Excel, there is a little bit that you will need to have some background. In that manuscript I mentioned earlier, I actually do go into kind of a light overview and introducing that topic. So those things I mentioned, the one-to-many and many-to-one, I have some examples in that paper, and that might help you if you're unfamiliar with those topics. And I do point to some resources there to learn more about database modeling there as well. And you don't necessarily need to know database modeling. Power BI, when you bring in your data sources and when you start breaking it up, when you do that close and apply step, it automatically tries to find the relationships. However, as you could probably guess, it's mostly right, but not always right. And so sometimes it will, find a incorrect relationship. You'll need to go in and you'll need to debug that. So having some background there, and also knowing, and how you set up your tables. As you saw, I had a lot of queries in there. They all were relating to each other. You can easily create a lot of logic errors, basically, if you have a relationship from two tables and then two other tables, and then those first two tables are relationship. You all of a sudden have, relationships that can go, when you filter something, it can go in either way, right? It can go through this table and down, or it can go directly down. And Power BI has no way to know which way to filter it. So that's where you need to be a little bit mindful of when you're setting up those relationships manually to have that background. Error bars. So I mentioned error bars earlier. They are now available in Power BI, so that's certainly a step in the right direction. But if you're coming from Excel and you're familiar with how to do that in Excel, it is admittedly a little bit more difficult to do it in Power BI. You aren't certainly saying, just give me the standard deviation, for this value. You are having to manually calculate that, and you're having to do the offset from generally your mean, your average there. So you're having to manually calculate some of those metrics, probably in DAX, and add those as specific fields to your visuals there. So I will admit it's definitely not quite as user-friendly as what you would face in Excel. So I wanted to make sure to familiarize everyone with that. And there are third-party visuals out there as well. I kind of briefly mentioned that earlier, but there's a whole library of third-party visuals. Microsoft, to their credit, made it open source for people to create visuals. And so there's a huge library out there, mostly free, but even some paid visuals out there that are really powerful that you can check out on the marketplace as well. And some of those certainly have error bars and might be a little bit more useful. Which brings me to my last one. Another visual that is difficult to reproduce is heat maps. So of course in ZooMonitor, you can easily create a heat map. In Excel, you can actually easily create a heat map. If you don't know how to do that, you can check out a resource library, and I have a guide on how to do that in Excel. In Power BI, it's certainly not as easy. Unfortunately, the visual that they have in Excel to do it doesn't have that ability to do it in Power BI. There is a third-party visual I found that you can create that. And so if you're interested in that, you can always email me, and I'm happy to share that. And there's different ways to do it. So I've also done scatter plots. I've done scatter plots and then put the background of my image as my map image. And so I have scatter plots in front of it. And so I'm putting dots of the locations. That's not quite a heat map. So there's kind of different ways you can try to visualize some of that space use data. But I will admit that is definitely something that isn't quite as user-friendly as what you'd be doing in ZooMonitor or even Excel there. So even with those limitations, though, I certainly would say that, for me personally, Power BI has been tremendously helpful for me at Lincoln Park. Obviously, with the massive amounts of data I have from 30 plus projects, getting any sense of that in any sort of useful time frame is going to be really difficult if I'm manually analyzing each data set. And so that's where having these reports, where basically all I'm doing is exporting the data from ZooMonitor, putting in an Excel file, and then go to my report that you saw there, that line report, and then I just click refresh. And then every visual in the report basically gets refreshed. And in fact, you don't even need to go in and click refresh, as I've learned in my Power BI journey. You can actually set it up for doing automatic refreshes. And so if you have it publishing to the service and your data source is a web-based source. And so for me, I use OneDrive. So I have all of my data files stored in my OneDrive folder for my organization. And you can get a OneDrive link. And when your data is stored in OneDrive, there's actually a web link that you can use. And you can use that web link as your source. That's super useful to know because I struggled at first with, using the raw Excel file as my data source. It was a different file pathway, of course, for my work computer, my home computer. And when I go back and forth between the two places, it would completely break and I'd have to, re-navigate the file pathway. Having it, navigate to that OneDrive web source there, that web URL, basically prevents that from happening. It's going to be looking at the same source no matter where you're at, and also allows you to do that automatic refresh. So that's definitely a really useful tip there. So I hope, certainly you have found this video helpful, and I hope that you can find some value in using Power BI with your behavior monitoring program. If you have any questions, of course, always feel free to email me, and I'm definitely happy to always chat more Power BI. So thanks for watching. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like that video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to be notified when we release more videos. If you have any questions about ZooMonitor, you can always feel free to contact us at ZooMonitor@lpzoo.org. Thanks.